Who doesn't have moments from your past that make you cringe? Who hasn't said, I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I wore that. I can't believe I thought that. I can't believe I did that. You ate dirt. You wanted to be a Ghostbuster. You shoplifted gum. You tried to be a white breakdancer. Plenty of liberals also want to abuse history to control the present. And last month, a scholar named James Sweet caught hell for calling them out for doing just that. He criticized the phenomenon known as presentism, which means judging everyone in the past by the standards of the present. It's the belief that people who lived 100 or 500 or 1,000 years ago really should have known better.
Let's buckle in, because what we're about to discuss isn't just a hot take, it's a flamethrower aimed straight at the heart of the woke movement. Bill Maher, a man who spent decades carrying the progressive torch, has looked around at his old political allies and basically said, "You've lost your minds." And he's not whispering, he's shouting it through a megaphone. Over the years, Maher's tone has shifted. Once he championed nearly every progressive cause, cheered every liberal win, and gladly joined cultural pilo-NS. But lately, he's turned around, realized the mob looks a little too much like the thing it claims to hate, and decided it's time to pump the brakes before we all drive off a cliff. We've all had cringeworthy moments in our past. Bad fashion choices, ridiculous childhood dreams, maybe even swiping a piece of gum just to feel rebellious. That's human. So when Maher calls out the insanity of judging people from centuries ago by today's moral standards, what scholars call presentism, he's not excusing bad behavior. He's defending perspective. Expecting someone in 1525 to share your iPhone and TikTok-shaped worldview is absurd. But the woke mob doesn't deal in perspective. They deal in absolutism.
The problem is that nobody ever gets canceled for being too woke. So you can say the craziest thing, like men can have babies, and then nobody will, even though people are thinking, well, that's kind of nuts, nobody will say it. They'll just fall in line. Oh, yeah, exactly. That's what I've always thought, men can have babies. Sure. I saw a dude who was glowing yesterday. I mean, and that's the problem.
And it's totally insane.
Cowardice.
Yes, it is. It's moral cowardice, isn't it? But
it's intellectual cowardice.
But it also comes from a place of reality, that fear, because they see people around them literally getting cancelled, getting shamed and abused and hounded out of jobs. And they think, I don't want it to happen.
Maher keeps hammering one point. Nobody ever gets cancelled for being too woke. You can say something so absurd it sounds like a rejected Monty Python sketch, like men can have babies, and people will just nod along out of fear. They've seen what happens when anyone questions the orthodoxy. Online mobs, media smear jobs, and careers destroyed overnight. That's not free speech, it's moral cowardice. Worse, it's intellectual cowardice. Professors lose jobs for quoting offensive language while teaching about offensive language. Comedians censor their jokes. Writers reshape entire scripts to appease hypersensitive Twitter critics. In this climate, nuance isn't ignored, it's hunted down and eliminated.
I can't count the number of stories I've either covered on the show or just read about of professors at colleges, which are supposed to be the bastions of free speech, who said something that was just an opinion.
One guy,
that was
one
different.
Professor in America, he gave a lecture for 25 years about the use of offensive language. And then some students complained about his use of offensive language in the lecture about offensive language. And he had to lose his job. And at that point, I just felt that was peak woke insanity. He literally was lecturing about offensive language and using offensive language to illustrate it.
They have no sense of nuance. They have no sense of context. They just know certain buzzwords or certain concepts are out of limits, off limits, and since social media is just a bunch of mean girls.
And then there's social media. If the founding fathers had Twitter, half of them would have been cancelled before the Constitution's ink even dried. What should be a digital town square has become a gladiator arena. It's not about debating ideas, it's about humiliating opponents. The toxicity spills into real life. People won't date someone because of political affiliation. Imagine being on a great date, laughter, connection, then you hear, "Did you vote Republican?" Boom. Game over. That's not politics, that's tribalism. Maher pushes back because he remembers what liberalism used to mean: lifting people up, tolerating different viewpoints, and fighting for equality without tearing down everything else. In his eyes, the woke movement has twisted that mission into something unrecognizable.
This is what's so obnoxious about that side of things, that just idea of we're not really lifting people up. Liberalism is about lifting people up, not catching people.
And tolerating people.
It's not about white self-loathing.
Yes.
It's about, yes, we have a horrible history in this country. Let's make it right in the ways that make sense. It's not just about catching people.
And the hypocrisy is staggering. In the past 70 years, America has made massive progress. Women vote, own property, and run Fortune 500 companies. Civil rights have expanded. Barriers have been shattered in politics, sports, business, you name it. Yet the woke crowd insists we're living in a dystopian nightmare worse than Russia or North Korea. That's absurd. Criticizing your president live on TV without being jailed is not oppression. But admitting progress would mean admitting victories. And if they've already won some battles, what would they have left to fight against?
So I think that really is kind of the center of the country. Old school liberalism, take a victory lap. You kind of won on a lot of things, but that's another funny pathology of liberals. They don't want to acknowledge progress because they somehow feel like if I acknowledge progress, well, then I'm not as authentic a progressive. It's right in your name. And that's what you're selling, progress.
Then comes the Trump factor. Here, Maher really breaks with the left. His blunt, endless legal cases against Trump were always going to backfire. Dragging him into court over the Stormy Daniels case might have satisfied MSNBC viewers, but to much of the country it turned him into a political martyr.
On Donald Trump, all this legal mayhem that's flying at him, does it actually empower him? Does it have the opposite effect, perhaps, to what the Democrats would hope it would have?
Yes, well, that was the end of the show tonight when I was talking about the Stormy Daniels issue. I mean, it's always going to strike people as sex. When it's about getting a guy for sex, I don't think they should have discouraged. I guess Alvin Bragg can do what he wants. But if I was the president or somebody, I would have discouraged him quietly. Let's not do this one. Because we're gonna see Trump hauled into court, as we did, and that's going to be the big story, and it's going to be just high fives on MSNBC. And look, I was thrilled.
And Maher was right. The non-stop coverage only made Trump the most talked about man in America, again. Instead of ending his career, they supercharged it. Like trying to put out a fire with gasoline, the result was a bigger blaze. He also calls out Hollywood's absurdity. Movies made just 15 years ago by liberal, woke-approved directors would now be torn apart for not being diverse enough. Not because the story required it, but because of a checklist. That's not authentic representation, it's box-ticking. It kills creativity. Characters are shoved in just to signal virtue instead of serve the story. That's not art, it's propaganda with a glossy finish.
I'm constantly amazed when I rewatch movies from only a decade or so ago, and they were made in a way that today would get you burned at the Twitter stake. It's complicated. From 2009, to name just one of many I could choose, was made by a who's who of the most blue ribbon certified Hollywood liberals, woke approved and Democratic Party contributing, from the stars to the producers to the director. But it apparently occurred to none of them to have any kind of minority in the cast. You would need a divining rod to find a person of color within 500 feet of this movie set. But if they made it today, they do better.
And it doesn't stop there. The woke movement has targeted America's most celebrated figures: Lincoln, Washington, Jefferson, Teddy Roosevelt. Statues toppled, names stripped, legacies reduced to a single flaw. A man's entire life judged by the worst thing he ever did, even if he helped build the freedoms being used to judge him. It's historical arrogance at its peak. Pretending people in 1776 should think like someone tweeting in 2025.
Many liberals also want to abuse history to control the present. And last month, a scholar named James Sweet caught hell for calling them out for doing just that. He criticized the phenomenon known as presentism, which means judging everyone in the past by the standards of the present. It's the belief that people who lived 100 or 500 or 1,000 years ago really should have known better.
Maher pushes back because without historical context, you can't understand progress. And without understanding progress, you can't protect it. Every society has ugly chapters. Slavery wasn't invented in America, it existed everywhere. Sumerians, Romans, African kingdoms, and yes, the early United States. Yet woke activists talk as if America dreamed it up in 1619. That's not history. It's activism dressed up as education.
Yes, because we hadn't then grown into the persons we would become. And humanity writ large is just the collective version of that. Did Columbus commit atrocities? Of course. But people back then were generally atrocious. Everybody who could afford one had a slave, including people of color. The way people talk about slavery these days, you'd think it was a uniquely American thing that we invented in 1619. But slavery throughout history has been the rule, not the exception. The Sumerians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, Romans, the Arabs, British, the early Americans, all the way up through R. Kelly.
Maher's message is simple. You can acknowledge past horrors without erasing the people who shaped today. You can fight for equality without destroying free speech. You can push for change without turning society into a cultural war zone. But the woke movement isn't after balance. They want purity tests, ideological conformity, and total control over the cultural narrative. Maher refuses to play along. His shift toward the center isn't about becoming conservative, it's about saying enough. Because here's the truth. If you let fear, moral arrogance, and historical amnesia rule the culture, you don't just lose humor or creativity, you lose the very foundation of progress. And if that collapses, it won't matter what political team you're on. Everyone loses, so maybe the real question isn't why is Bill Maher speaking out now? The real question is, why isn't everyone?